Yeah, our first session of the day, myself and Jussi are going to be having a quick sort of nice casual fireside chat about assembly and Demoscene in Finland. So I'm going to give it up for Jussi.
Hey. Always nice to be open up the second day. There's always the perky people who actually didn't go drinking.
All 5 of them.
or did go drinking and they actually haven't sobered up yet.
Cool. So I guess for those of the audience who don't know who you are, could you mind just telling us a bit about you? And
sure. I currently serve as the CEO of Unity Finland and on the executive team for Unity Technologies, which happened about 3.5 years ago when Unity acquired my company Amplifier, which actually can trace its roots directly to the demo scene. Back in the early 90s, I was in the BBS scene, which was the pre-internet for general public days, and I was running a BBS, which turned kind of connected to the demo scene for running a kind of a site for them, if you will. And that led into multiple things. This Demoscene group turned out to be one of the most influential of the 90s in the world, called Future Crew, and Future Crew got involved in organized assembly. Assembly turned into connecting me to a lot of smart people in the Finnish game industry, much smarter than I am, and that eventually kind of got me into the game industry, if you will. So I think if there's something to say about the origins of the Finnish game industry, it's very, very tightly linked to the Finnish demo scene, and it's kind of also the same way I ended up working in games.
Wonderful. Well, I guess kick off proper. Like, can you tell us a little bit about assembly itself? It's been going for about 25 years now. How did that kick off?
Sure. So Assembly is today a 4-day around-the-clock festival for albino nerds to escape the sunlight. So it's for young males, most of 16-year-olds, to go inside a big hall, play LAN games around the clock, and there is still a core of a demo scene part to that. Now, Assembly 25 years was purely demo scene. That was what it was. It was a gathering of like-minded, if you will, hackers who were specializing in audiovisual programming, making graphics, making music, and competing on those skills, either individually or in groups, to see which ones are the best and what's cool and what's happening. It was kind of because pre-internet days, there was fairly few ways of keeping in touch apart from sending floppy disks in mail. You wanted to really come together and see other people and compete and see who's the best, if you will. So Assembly was not the first Finnish demo party, but it was one of the earliest and one of the largest in Finland to that date. About 720 people turned up on the first one. And as it goes, demo parties are really known for the groups that compete and the productions they create. And there were a couple of really important productions released in the first Assembly and the Assembly scenes, which kind of established both the Finnish demo scene as well as Assembly as a place to be, because those awesome people making this awesome stuff were there. And suddenly, in about 3 years, we had people coming from around the world, for primarily Europe, into Helsinki. And influential people that went in to do things like the Unreal Engine. Tim Sweeney was there. You got people that eventually started companies like Media Molecule. A lot of people who were then younger, maybe more hackerish, and wanted to just be around with other people like that. So Assembly kind of is what its name stands for. It's a gathering point for people of like-minded disposition around computers, and see what comes out of that.
Fantastic. I was just wondering if you could give a sort of brief overview of what kind of challenges the demo scene sector has faced.
Well, it is clear that if you look back in the early 90s, if you were walking in Helsinki, you would actually see these mom-and-pop computer shops that assembled computers, and they would put displays on their display screens through the street, and you see demos running there, because they were the coolest thing to show people that were prospective buyers of PCs, because it was the best thing you would see actually running on a PC. That changed around after hardware-accelerated graphics came about, and game companies putting professional developers with a lot more time and energy and eventually talent also into that. So I would say the kind of the demo scene's heyday was the early 90s to mid 90s, when it could kind of stand on its own and compete even visually against even professional productions. Since then, I think with that reduction of visibility towards the general public, the interest towards demo scene has waned. And it's natural. You scene, you get less new talent starting up, and eventually it becomes more centrified, if you will, or gentrified. So the demo scene continues to exist, but it's become more a playing for people that are really into that stuff for a particular reason, or people who were already involved back in the day. So it's substantially less influential, but there's a lot of really great talent and a lot of people who do it either as a hobby, they do it as a creative outlet, they may work in games during the day, but they want to experiment and do stuff that's kind of breaking the norms or taking their skills to different places they cannot do creatively at work.
Wonderful. And how much of sort of the current games landscape do you reckon can be traced back to Demoscene? I know you mentioned there like companies like Media Molecule being involved in that kind of stuff back in the day.
So in Finland, it was really homely back in the late 90s because every single game company was founder, the team, and about 9 out of 10 employees were Demosceners. It was really like, it's almost like you go to a company, you know everybody, because they used to be at assembly, they used to be in a demo group. So it was very influential in the founding of the Finnish game development industry. There's obviously legends in the industry that didn't come from there, but primarily you could say that 8 out of 10 were somewhere involved, somewhere during the line in the demo scene. But that kind of also changed as the game development scene became more professional. You start seeing schools providing training, and with games becoming more and more attractive and more visible in media, you'd see people coming into games directly through the games. And in one sense, I could say that the indie game development scene, especially a few years back, kind of resembled what the demo scene was back in the early 90s. It was people just creatively expressing themselves, coming together, doing game jams, competing. It has a lot of the same tenets. It was, I would say, like if the demo scene was the path to games because you made these things and they looked almost like games, and you could say, well, we know how to do this, let's do games. Then I think the path now has become kind of a hobbyist, modern indie game developer type of path or professional path. So it's kind of shifted, and demo scene is not at all a primary path towards game development anymore. But it was formative, both here and in the Nordics in general. You can trace the origins of DICE directly to a demo group. Supercell back in Digital Chocolates days was actually called Sumea, and Sumea is a name of a demo from a group called Virtual Dreams. So it's really formative in the Nordics, I would say, and to some extent in Europe. Not at all in North America, because there really wasn't a large scene ever to talk about. They were more interested in TV and money.
Why do you think it didn't ever take off in America or anywhere like that?
They had more entertainment, and people wanted to make more money immediately. Like we had some North American demo sceners coming into assembly back in the mid-90s, and they would say like, well, no wonder you guys make demos because your TV sucks and your winters are long and lonely. Too little entertainment, you had to make your own.
Cool, and I guess beyond like the formation of sort of companies in the Finnish games industry, and I guess like that kind of DNA being present in the indie game scene today, like what kind of influence do you think the demo scene and assemblies had?
Well, we talked about that pretty overall. I think it's fundamental. I think there's a lot of great technical talent in the Finnish game industry, and I would say also that comes primarily, I would say, from making your own game engines. That was something which you had to make your own demo engine, so you turned into making game engines. The other thing I think is what's really important about demo groups is that they taught people how to work in a group. Like, you would have a programmer, maybe 2, maybe 3, you would have a graphics artist, you'd have a musician, you might have a designer of sorts, and everybody needed to collaborate to produce something creative that was there's an expression of what you wanted to bring about, and have that to be created while managing creative tension, while managing individual preferences. So I think there was a lot of teamwork that evolved, and that combined with, I would say, primary technical talent turned into the genesis of these companies. And I think a lot of this is, a lot of these skills are really soft skills that you wouldn't have learned otherwise if you were just programming or just doing music.
Wonderful. Obviously, right now, the Finnish games market is largely mobile-centric. I think I read somewhere that is 80% of studios in Finland are mobile developers, whilst only 17% are PC. I'm just kind of curious, like, what you see the future of PC development being in Finland. I mean, Assembly seems quite PC-centric, and obviously you've got companies like Remedy and Console Order, which are like, they're big PC names.
Yeah. So, I think the reason why we have a lot of mobile game studios is pretty clearly that we have a strong pedigree in mobile, and there was an early attraction towards mobile, and there were very early winners like Rovio and later on Supercell that led the way and inspired people to create studios around a mobile. Mobile obviously since has become increasingly tough. And some people pivoted to PC from there, just saying that discovery is not as much of a problem, but that's really no longer quite the case anymore, even on PC. So to answer your questions, I think PC is more free. It has actually more opportunities for different types of business models. What I see lacking on PC teams, quite generally, not just talking about Finland, is the kind of if you will, the overall self-publishing mentality that you find on mobile. Mobile studios generally end up being their own masters. Even if they're navigating tough waters with increasing competition and very hard user acquisition costs and tough discovery, they go into that, at least nowadays, knowing that they have to be able to manage this environment. I think that one of the problems I see in the PC industry in general is that it's more about just making a game and then putting it on Steam or somewhere. And that's really not a viable business strategy anymore. Even you can go back to working with a publisher if you really don't want to master the skills yourself, but I think a lot of these people escape to mobile to escape the slavery of publishers over developers and kind of be their own masters. But I think we're in the risk that if these business skills or kind of how to run a self-publisher don't translate to PC, these studios are either end up with developers that are kind of controlled by publishers or as failures because they cannot get discovered anymore. We've all seen these charts about Steam releases going up and up and up, and now that they
mad, isn't it?
Now that it's opened up, I think the same discovery problems are manifesting. So I expect it's a long-winded answer. I actually expect more PC studios because there's more freedom to do paid models, subscription models, experiment with different things, and the audience is more savvy and is looking out for more unique experiences, and it's easier to understand what the PC gamer is versus mobile is everyone, and it's harder to find your audience. However, the flip side is there's a lot of people who think that too. You're competing with an increasing amount of content, and a lot of people don't have the skills or even the interest of developing a self-publishing skill set. And I think those are going to be the people that are not going to do well.
Fantastic. What's your take on the current PC games landscape? I mean, I know you mentioned just now that discoverability is like sort of the issue number one when it comes to PC, particularly Steam.
So, my take on the PC gaming landscape. It's a uniquely diverse set of games you cannot find almost anywhere like it. And mobile has a huge amount of games, but it's kind of stratified into the winners and the single button, very fast casual games. And the middle exists, but it's harder to sustain. And I think PC, you are still able to create what people call triple-I or triple indie titles that are really kind of really well-polished indie titles that can be paid and can sustain a team of 10, 20 people, maybe 30, 40 people even, and then maybe can go to console also. So I find PC as a much freer playing ground to an extent that doesn't have the same business pressure as mobile, but also lacks the ability to maybe have the massive outcomes that I still think are somewhat possible on mobile. They are harder to hit, but they kind of exist. On PC, it's still like, how would I put it? If you really like to make games and you really don't care that much about the business point, then I think PC is the only one where it's somewhat possible, but I still think that's a recipe for failure. But for people who really just want to make a game, and they have this idea for this game, and I think that's the only market where you can have some success on that. But what I really want to see more is people going beyond Steam on PC, building their own audience, really attracting people to a game that's a living, breathing thing that people want to buy into the universe and come to you. And the biggest successes on PC are not on Steam. It's in a sense, you can look at Riot, and you can look at some other companies that have kind of managed to create this thing and their own destination that they control. And while you can say PUBG is the biggest outlier right now, and it's the biggest success, it's on Steam, so what are you talking about, Jussi? I don't think that's just being like Steam is. You just really treat Steam like you treat the web. If you cannot succeed on the web, I don't think you can quite succeed on Steam. You have to have the same skills of how do you amass an audience, how you engage those players. So to me, I come back to this theme. You can make a game, you can put it in Steam, and maybe make a good amount of money. It's still kind of possible, it's getting much harder. The evolution of the PC studio has to be towards this self-publishing model where you really kind of tackling discovery, re-engagement, retention of those players as a core skill set on top of making the game.
So is that a case of developers selling direct to consumers like through their websites rather than sort of trusting themselves to like a third-party storefront?
I think you should never trust yourself to a third-party storefront. If you think they are not in the business of making you successful, they're in the business of making their platform successful. And if you don't take your success as a primary goal for yourself, then you're kind of stupid.
You're talking there about developers getting their own audience and discoverability being an issue. Like, what kind of tips would you offer developers to like try and get themselves noticed in what is an increasingly saturated market?
Well, you could blabber the usual platitudes of, hey, influencer marketing, hey, this and that. But I think fundamentally it comes back to really knowing who your audience is and making the game for that and identifying your core audience and really engaging them throughout the development of the game. So you have you validate whether there's any people actually that want to play your game, and you turn those people into a megaphone through which your message gets amplified to the second tier of people. So it's really about building your own community around your game, whichever way you take that, whether that's you go to a forum where people talk about, I wish I had this game, or, oh, I'm actually making this, and start converting them. When you go to influencers who are really keen on a particular game genre and kind of get them on board one way or another. But fundamentally, the tactics will change depending on what's in vogue. But what doesn't change is that your game needs to really resonate with an audience that truly wants what you're building. And say what you want about Star Citizen. It has a lot of epic clusterfucks around that. But man, if they didn't nail that to the tune of about 100 million.
That game's insane.
It is insane, but you're not going to be that company. But if you think about what they managed to achieve, is they really found their audience and they really talked to them with basically vaporware and got them to fund this whole thing. And now I think there's lunacy involved in there, but there's learnings that you can do in a non-lunatic way, which is how do I find my audience? How do I engage them? How keep them engaged while I'm making this game? Because if you're in the basement, you're typing away and nobody knows about the game, you're not engaging your core audience, you're not talking with them, you're not listening to them, you're just making a game for yourself. And eventually that may succeed, but it also may be that nobody really wants it apart from you and your mom.
Fantastic. I think that's all my questions. I think we have time. We have like a few minutes if the audience has any questions at all.
There are way too many smart people that know more about the stuff than I do in this audience. I'm kind of petrified. Which one? All of it.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming to speak today.